Good Friday morning, and welcome back, friends, to our second episode of Finding God in the Dark. My name is Don Stevens. Some folks call me PD, short for Pastor Don.
And I'm Evan or RevEv or a whole bunch of other things that people call me.
Most
So
can be shared, but some maybe not.
probably. Uh, so Don, you watched the movie, The Big Lebowski. What did you think? And they're joining us for our conversation.
Okay, yeah, I noticed they are with us. Um, I will. Okay, well, let me first kind of touch some of the important stuff that people might want to know about the film. It is a Coen Brothers movie. The Coen Brothers have written and directed a lot of movies. Some have been, real popular cinematic type of things like Fargo and No Country for Old Men and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And, films that have been Academy Award nominated. Um, but I think they're known for their very offbeat sort of humor, and so this is definitely the other end of that spectrum. uh Lebowski is definitely the not the dramatic Academy Award. This is more the other end of that.
Mhm.
And there is, one of the first things that I noticed is there's a lot of F-bombs in the film. Now, don't get me wrong here. I don't have a problem with that. There certainly are times when I say those words. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't.
Right.
Um, but because our audience is primarily, we hope, people from the churches that we serve or have served, we want to be very clear that when we watch a film or we recommend a film, that we're not endorsing the film. Okay. If that's sort of, hopefully we can give you that kind of heads up every time we watch it. Like, okay, this one's got that sort of stuff in it. And if that's going to bother you, don't watch it. But what
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think we
right,
want
exactly.
to do here, and this is, for me, more setting the ground rules. What we really want to do here is help people to look at a film critically, discerningly, and find what in it is the Christian stuff, the stuff that speaks to our Christian faith, which is what I tried to do with Lebowski.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't find a lot of it. I will say
Mhm.
that. This, I think last week, and I don't know if it was when we were talking before we started recording or not, but you had mentioned Seinfeld. This movie
Yes.
feels like an episode of Seinfeld
Hmm.
where there's a guy and something happens and there's a, confusion, and these events go along, and at the end of it, nothing happened.
Hmm.
It's the
Hmm.
same guy. And so it was kind of hard to really pull any kind of Christian themes out of it. I'm gonna suggest that it's very possible that the reason you like this film as much as you do, and I didn't connect with it as much, is generational. I'm thinking that's a, because you and I are,
Okay.
look, I'm right on the cusp of being a boomer. Okay. I'm
Right.
like at the
Right.
very last year of boomers. So I can, this film I didn't really connect with that much,
Hmm.
but tell me why you enjoy it so much.
Before we jump into the Big Lebowski, I would, and maybe we can end up doing a couple more of these as time goes on. I think one of the best Coen Brothers films for overtly religious themes is A Simple Man. Oh, sorry, A Serious Man.
Serious
Um,
man.
A
I don't
Serious
think
Man
I have certainly not seen that one.
that came out I don't know, 09, 10, 11, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And it's about a Jew in Minnesota, and his professional and personal life starts to crumble, and he's trying to make sense of it all. It's really supposed to be a modern telling of the story of Job.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he goes to different friends, for answers. He goes to a rabbi, So that is really a phenomenal movie. That's like
Okay.
overtly, and of course, her brother, Where Art Thou? I mean, there's a lot of religious themes in that. And I would dare say even in No Country for Old Men. But I think the Coen brothers catalog, there's a few misses. Most of them to me are hits.
Yeah.
And
I
they're
have seen I've seen No Country for Old Men.
mhm.
I thought it was pretty good. I love Fargo.
Oh, I
Um
do too. That's one of the first movies I kind of really fell in love with.
yeah, so there's it's not like, for me at least, it's not the directors. I think it was just this
Yeah.
film. I felt like it was very kind of meandering and didn't really go anywhere. And again, our opinions are subjective, right?
Oh, of course.
With the movies that we'll watch, they might be good movies, they might be great movies, and they might be steaming pile of garbage.
Right.
That's not the point. The point of what we're watching is not to be critical necessarily of the film or its quality, but to be discerning about finding where our faith is reflected in it. So again,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that we're focusing on that, because there's, if we get to a film like Dogma, for instance, that film is overtly religious and yet very irreverent.
Yeah.
So if we were to, if people might watch that and get really offended, and understand that we're not watching it necessarily because we think it's a good movie or we endorse it, but that if you happen to come across it, you could be able to pull out what are the redeeming qualities, so to speak.
Well, I think that's kind of a high level view of one of our intentions is to be able to interface with pop culture
Right.
with a Christian lens.
Absolutely.
And to and I think also like with something like the Big Lebowski, let me move into the film uh, specifically. It's really, and I think maybe it's generational, maybe it's just people who are into certain other things. Like it is a cultural touchstone kind of a movie.
Oh, there's
Like
no
there's
question.
references all
I
over the
do
place.
I
Yeah,
do my research, right?
yeah,
And
right.
there's no question this film has a major cult following,
It's huge. It's huge,
which
and
is
the quotations of the film are everywhere. There's like Lebowski Fest where people like at bowling alleys and drink White Russians and dress up like the dude and like speak in movie quotes to each other. Um,
okay.
so why do I like the movie? I love the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack's phenomenal.
Dad,
Um,
I think I sent you a text message or something about it.
yeah,
I love the soundtrack's amazing.
yeah, I have it
I
on
I give it
vinyl.
a lot of credit for that. This even like there's a Spanish language version of Hotel California
Yep,
in it. That's like,
yep.
wow, that's cool.
And then there's Strange, like when he first meets Maud and she's painting.
Hmm.
And I won't give any of that away because again, that's a little edgy. Like there's this strange like chant, that's
Hmm.
there. And then of course Kenny Loggins in the first edition. Bob Dylan is in the opening montage of the movie at the bowling
Right.
alley. So I love the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack's phenomenal. Dead Flowers, Towns Van Zant's version is
Hmm.
on there. So I love the soundtrack. And I do like that it's and maybe this is just kind of built on me through subsequent viewings that like I fall in love with like a different character every time. Like
Okay.
I'll really, watch Donnie's here, Steve Buscemi's character,
Right.
or the dude, or Walter. I'll kind of like, or Maud, or the nihilists, or one of the. I'll kind of focus on them for the movie, and I think it's a combination of the dialogue, the acting, the set design. Like, there's just something so rich to me about each character,
Hmm.
and kind of how they change in the movie. One of the things that strikes me is um, ostensibly the movie is about, this guy's like a slacker, right? I mean, he's,
Right.
you see him at the beginning, like right opening the half and half in the grocery store to smell it and then paying for it with a check. And he's like wearing his bathrobe. I mean, he's a slacker, he's lazy. All he wants to do is, do drugs and listen to Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Right.
Um, but you kind of see him um, like in the movie, that kind of helps him. His attitude, the way he kind of is in the world, helps him get through. And then you have Walter, who, I think if you're to pull any, maybe not Christian, but religious or themes, you kind of get it from Walter. I mean, Walter, it's intimated in the movie, he's divorced. He converted to Judaism when he was married, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but this is a guy who values, um, like a worldview. He hates the nihilists, those three guys who
Right.
are in it,
Right.
he's like, they don't believe in anything. And then, he goes on about socialism. He's like, at least it's an ethos. This is a guy who wants a worldview. He believes in believing in something and kind of having that be your guiding principle. He doesn't want to drive the car right on Shabbos because you can't do that.
Right.
And when they're bowling, right, and he believes that guy steps over the line. He's like, doesn't anybody give a what about the rules?
Yeah. The rules.
So this guy he's all about
Of
having a
course, of
standard,
course, his
having a
way of
worldview.
enforcing the rules was to brandish a
But to
gun,
pull a gun
which
on you,
is
yeah. Market zero. Yeah. So you're right, but it's interesting. And then Donnie is, just kind of this guy who there are some um, theories about the movie that that Donnie is kind of a figment of their imagination. Because if you watch the movie carefully, Donnie doesn't interact with anybody else
mm-hmm.
in the whole movie, just Walter and the dude. He doesn't interact with anybody else.
I didn't catch that, but now that you say it, I see it. Okay.
Yeah. So there's some theories of which is really
And
interesting.
so then, at the risk of, for those who watched it, where I'm going here. But at the risk of spoiler alert, so then is that end resolution and what happens with Donnie is that the dude and Walter growing up?
Again,
Maybe
so that
if
is
Donnie's an imaginary character, right?
right, right. So there is, yes, that is part of the theories that say that he's a figment of imagination or he doesn't really exist. There are some who say that somehow kind of Donnie is typical or it represents some way the relationship between Walter and the dude. I don't know, but it's interesting.
Because
Interesting to think about.
I mean, an interesting part, at least to me, is that most of the interaction between Walter and Donnie is Walter telling Donnie to shut the F up.
Right,
You know,
right. So is
almost
that
like it's his conscience.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly? You're right. So I don't know. Again, the theory is that if anybody watches the movie or is interested, and you just go on Google, you can go down some rabbit holes about
Well, I
that.
did.
But
That's interesting because and I sent you a link. I don't know if you read the article that I read. And I'm not going to try to, do somebody else's, just throw somebody else's theories out there. But some of the stuff that I read, okay,
mm-hmm.
was one of the theories was that the bowling alley, they're trying to apply Christian principles to the film, that the bowling alley was sort of an allegory for church. And
Okay.
that this was, and that the dude, Jeff Bridges, an allegorical Jesus. Now, I didn't quite get that because in my mind, an allegorical Jesus is self-sacrificial, and the dude was really more self-interested. So I don't quite. That's to me that's a stretch. Although
Yeah.
he does change at the end. Now, the very obvious one that I could see when I read this theory was that there's a character who bowls on a different team named
Ah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but
But
he's
he
got
is
he's
not a nice fella.
right.
And really make some very crude gestures at these guys and some very sexually suggestive things, and someone suggested that he's perhaps an allegory for the devil. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that's interesting that you would name your devil allegory character Jesus. You know,
Yeah, it might be. You know, and I think too, Don, I used to have a shirt with the dude's face on it, and it said "The dude abides."
the dude abides, right?
Okay, so when I think of the word abide, I also think of Jesus in the Gospel of John, right?
Where he
About
says,
abiding in Him,
"Abide in me, and I'll abide."
and
Wait.
I abide in you. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then abiding is linked to bearing fruit, right?
Right.
And so I think of and I think of the very end, you know, with it's Sam, what's his name?
Sam Elliott.
Thank you, Sam Elliott, who's in the opening scene and the closing scene back at the bowling alley. Right. So it
Right.
starts at the bowling alley with him, and then it ends back at the bowling alley
Well,
with
he's
him.
just a monologue at
And
the beginning, and then he makes an appearance in the middle, and then he
he
shows
makes
at
it
the
a
end.
well, yeah, but at the end, it's like he talks to the dude. It's like, oh, you're here, you know? And
Hmm.
so they talk to each other, and he says something like, it's comforting to know that the dude is out there, you know, abiding for all of us sinners, or something like that. And
Right.
I think, you know, when I think of abiding, that's a very relational term. Okay.
Hmm.
And I hear in that ease, comfort, familiarity, um, patience, long suffering. Um, and I think if you look at the dude through that lens, you can either kind of see him through the lens, and I would argue that he's kind of both, right? You can see him through the lens of this kind of self-interested, lazy bum, right? You know, is the bum as Jeffrey Lebowski, you know,
Right.
the bum's lost, you know, but or you can understand him as kind of this compassionate, easygoing, just, you know, comfortable guy that so many different people, he's so patient with Walter, who, you know, is a very different type of personality.
Walter's
You know,
obnoxious.
yeah, if Donnie's real, Walter's the one who's always yelling at him and swearing at him. The
Yeah.
dude never does that.
Yeah.
You know, you know, these major things happen. How many times has his house broken into, this and that? And he just kind of, you know, keeps like this. His car's stolen, he gets it back, it's beat up. He just kind of rides with it. And so I think you can either understand him as this self-interested bum, or kind of this almost kind of zen-like abiding character who's patient and kind of open to life experience and to anybody he meets. But maybe that's supposed to be the growth we see in him over the movie. Maybe he starts more as one and ends up more as the other. But I think that you could probably unpack and mine that word abide. I mean, that's one of the probably the most well known quotes from the film, "The Dude
Right.
Abides."
Right.
So
Right. And well, in that sense, then is the dude, at least in that sense, I can buy that the dude is sort of a Christ figure, right?
mm-hmm.
At least in an exemplar of even temperedness, right?
Right, right.
Um, you know, I'm still, I'm still kind of hooked on, a Christ figure is also self-sacrificial. When you look at, I'll just throw one out there that I've used with youth groups, Neo in the Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who sacrifices himself to save the world, basically. I mean, that's a very obvious, in your face kind of Christ. The dude, not so much more subtle.
Yes, it is much more subtle. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I don't know if I would, you know, even kind of call him a Christ figure, um but I think that he is, on the surface it doesn't seem it, but I really think, maybe because I've, you know, again, it's all subjective and I've watched the movie so many times, but the more you sit with him, you kind of see, you know, he's deeper than just kind of like the pot smoking, white Russian drinking, you know, bathrobe wearing surface. Um, you know, there's like more there. And so anyway, I kind of like, I like the complexity of the character.
Okay.
And really of all the characters. So yeah. And again, sometimes with movies, I'm probably, you can overthink it, but you just like what you like, right?
Exactly. That's always the case. There are plenty of bad films that I like.
Yeah,
You know, it doesn't
because you just like what you like.
exactly. And that's, I think, maybe another point to make is that we're not trying to tell people what films they should like or shouldn't like. But hopefully teaching some skills about how to be discerning and look at the films you like and understand why you like them and if they're connecting to your faith, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, and I think to take something like the Big Lebowski, um, movies that maybe don't have any overt religious themes to them,
right,
and then to develop an interpretive lens through which to view those films and to see if maybe there are some themes, maybe there are things that apply to the life of faith. I think that's there in a lot of films that on the surface, they're not talking about God. Maybe the setting is not in a church or there's
right.
nobody who's overtly religious in the movie, but you can sit with it and you can start to just go deeper. And
Which then of
that's a good thing.
course makes you wonder, was that the intention of the writer and director,
Mhm.
or is it just part of culture? All right.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
Did they mean to do that? I mean, if I'll go back to the Matrix, then the first three Matrix films are just saturated with religious symbolism, but it's every religion you can imagine. It's not just, I go back to, there's a scene towards the end of the third film where there's a close up on the Oracle, and she's wearing earrings that are the yin and yang symbol, except they're not black and white. It's green on both sides. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. Somebody needs to ask the Wachowskis what it means, you know?
Oh yeah, sure, sure. Yeah.
And I've heard that a director or a producer of a film isn't going to put something in the frame or in the script that they don't want to be there.
Right.
So, is it accidental? Is it cultural? Or is it intentional? That's a question that maybe we don't get answers for unless somebody specifically asks them, you know.
Mhm.
And even then, I think a lot of times Hollywood people are a little yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Uh,
all three.
so I hope I don't know, maybe our listeners got something from that. Again, I think the caveats are um well heard.
Yeah.
That yeah, watch it. You're kind of know what you're getting into, but
There's look, the films we may watch, in the course of however long we do this,
mhm.
they could be violent, they could be, foul language, that sort of thing.
Right.
So we have to be aware that, those things are out there. And the reality is that a lot of that is just part of popular culture.
Right.
And
Right.
so what we're hopefully trying to do from a scriptural biblical perspective is learn to live in the world and not of the world, right?
Right.
To be able to look at the world and go, okay, that's not great, but I can see where that points back to the cross in some way, shape, or form, you know.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So I'm got
All
on
right.
my
What do you want me to watch, buddy?
what's that?
My turn, isn't it?
Yeah, now it's your turn. Now,
I
we
guess I'll watch
talked last week. I think we talked in the pod about Hamilton. I'm not going to make you watch Hamilton. Um
Thank you. I love you, PD.
it's
Uh-huh.
look, I love the show, but it's not for everybody, and that's fine.
Mhm.
I would really rather have you watch something that you have no familiarity with whatsoever. And then that gives me a chance to go back and review it too. So what let's go a different direction. I love Japanese anime. you familiar with it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is there any that you know of that you haven't seen?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot. I've watched most of uh, like Spirited Away,
Miyazaki,
um,
the Miyazaki films.
Miyazaki stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I love his
Howl's
stuff.
Moving Castle.
Yeah.
No, I love. I do. I've watched Spirited Away probably 10 times with one
Yeah,
of
I
my
just
girls.
watched it last week with my son.
It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
How about Akira? You ever seen it?
if I, how do you spell it?
Akira. Akira.
Let me just see it. No.
All right. Well, how about you watch that?
Okay.
That's one of the most prominent, well-known anime films to at least in the States. Um, it's a little bit older. I'm gonna say mid 80s ish.
Okay. I
Um,
just looked it up. It says 88.
there you go.
Yep.
Um, but it is, any hardcore fan of anime has at least one copy of it. Maybe they've
Okay.
got two or three because they've
Okay.
got one they pirated and then one that was released and then they've got a special edition, that kind of thing. So it
Wow.
is.
It says here on Wikipedia, which take that for what it is, I guess.
Mhm.
It's regarded as the most influential and iconic anime film ever made. That's pretty huge. Is it really?
Could be. I'm not sure I'd go that far. There's some that are more seminal. I've got a book at home about the 25 most influential anime films. And it's
Okay.
in there. It's one of the 25 listed in the book, but it's
Okay.
arguable, which one would be the top. But Akira
Okay.
it's a sci-fi sort of a cyberpunk, if you're familiar with that
Oh
genre.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And like a lot of Japanese anime, a little weird, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
It's-
love that.
but good
Okay.
stuff. So there's your assignment. Watch Akira. It is for those who are watching, that is a cartoon. Japanese anime is generally hand drawn, although it's sometimes computer animated cartoons from Japan. Sometimes they're even still in Japanese language. So this one is, I think you can get both, but watch it in English, doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
And
I'm sure that's probably on streaming service.
oh, it's out there.
Yeah.
It's out there. If not, call me because I've got a copy of it.
Okay. Okay. It
So
looks like it's on Netflix. So perfect.
there you go.
Excellent.
All right. So that's Evan's assignment for next week is Akira. Um, for those who are continuing to watch, thank you for watching. If you'd like to subscribe, you'll find a link somewhere here on the YouTube page. I go like in the corner. I don't do that. Wherever, it's on the page. And exactly. I don't know. And folks, thanks for following along, and we hope that you continue to find God in the dark. Take care. We'll see you
Yes.
all next week.
Abide.